let's tell a story which connects Jeffrey Epstein, Peter Thiel, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's former chief strategist, Elon Musk, the right-wing hard right party AfD in Germany, the Reform Party in the UK, the National Rally in France, and maybe a few other people as well. As long as this administration's in power, you face the greatest crisis to the American system since 1865. Yeah. And that, of course, is the Civil War, right? And that's just where we are. And if you look at it that way, for me, Tim, that's where you can connect the dots. You can connect the dots to Epstein, to ICE, to Trump flagrantly, as he did yesterday, completely acting illegally in terms of the way that he approaches the environment. When he got the Clean Coal Award, blah, 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 right? To the gutting of federal agencies. It just is an authoritarian regime. Yeah. And what's the secret to an authoritarian regime? The authoritarian regime.
You are listening to CEO Retort.
My guest is Professor Scott Lucas, a highly experienced and globally renowned expert in American politics, US and British foreign policy, and a wide range of international affairs, with specific focus on the Middle East, Iran, Europe, and Asia. He also has expertise in the new media, intelligence services, and propaganda. Scott is a frequent and leading political analyst on major international media outlets, including Times Radio, BBC, CNN, Sky News, Al Jazeera English, France 24, and many others. He has also been an active journalist since 1979 and is the founder and editor-in-chief of EA Worldview, a prominent news site that provides daily news and analysis of global affairs. Okay guys, I need a very big favor from you. If you are watching on YouTube, please make sure you hit the subscribe button, because that makes a massive difference for our podcast. It literally costs you nothing other than a split-second click. But if you're also watching or listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, make sure that you give us a follow there. But in order for it to count, you also need to leave us a review. Please feel free to give us whatever review you think that it's fair, but it's important that you do, because otherwise they don't count your following. Why? I have no idea, but that's just how it is. So I'll really, really appreciate it if you do that. And now, without further ado, let's get back to the episode.
You can tell me all your great thoughts on this craziness that we've been watching this week.
Oh my God. It is crazy. I mean, actually, because one of the things I wanted to explain to listeners in general, that I want to apologize that we didn't go live 2 Thursdays ago. That was supposed to be a thing. So that was, if it's any consolation, I think that's the first episode that we missed for in the entire year. So, but the reason is, like, at the time I wanted to have a live about Epstein, but things were evolving so quickly. It was just like, okay, well, where do we even start? It was crazy. But at the same time, as you know, Scott, that, we were working on building the new news outlet that we've been building, which is the Retort, retortmedia.com, which went live yesterday. Yes, in beta, but it's there. Finally, it was intense. And I kind of mentioned it in, I think it was when I was with Richard Murphy, I believe. The idea is that I don't want the podcast to be the only retort outlet, as it were, right? Because the podcast, effectively, as is the case with all podcasts, the host tends to be the feature. I don't want to be the feature. Okay. This is my show, I guess. Fair enough, but that's not really the point. The point is always about sharing knowledge, getting real experts out of the clickbait shadows, as I like to say, and, effectively challenge the big podcasters that bring all the clickbait idiots out there. And they all seem to be sharing the same guests. But the other issue that I've noticed in the last year, as I approach loads of different guests to invite them over and so on, many of them are camera shy, as you know. And they're kind of like, I don't want to do podcasts. I'm not really comfortable with these things, etc. But I can write something for you. And I thought, okay, that's great. But what am I going to do with the writing? I'm not going to sit here and read what they wrote. So that kind of hit me. I said, well, maybe we should have a separate outlet where we can invite these experts to write, whatever things that they want to write about, talking about whatever issues and so on. And that seems to be getting good responses. So the journal bit of the ceoretort.com now moved to there. So effectively, I'm writing my stuff there. I'm using less LinkedIn. I just share stuff on LinkedIn. But the fact that we've got a situation, as we're seeing with TikTok USA, that now it's kind of ironic. Not that long ago, they were going on about, oh, China is watching us. China is controlling it. Well, it's even worse now under Larry Ellison. It's crazy. So, and I feel, okay, I don't want people like us, Scott, to be effectively under the mercy of these broligarchs who control, officially now, they are controlling the information ecosystem. Okay. And LinkedIn, of course, has been, seen as suppressive, especially when it comes to women and women's posts and so forth. And the evidence is clear. There's something definitely going on there. And I felt, you know what, screw this. I'd rather have our own thing. It's on our server, no restrictions, and I can just share stuff on LinkedIn, Substack, whatever. By the end of the day, whatever they do is not going to impact us here because it's on our servers and, with very, very sort of small number of trusted partners who are not based in the US. So that kind of makes life easier. So that's why we've been busy. So that Thursday was a bit of a crazy week. Not to mention, as I mentioned as well, with Epstein. But here we are, live again, with more Epstein craziness, Scott. So,
yeah.
On that note, we mentioned the broligarchs. Where would you like to start? Shall we start with what we've seen yesterday, the craziness that we saw yesterday in the committee?
Well, Tim, I think for me, and I do want to talk about what happened in the House Judiciary Committee with Pam Bondi, because I was infuriated by it. But I think to get into that, for me, it's important to get into the context of where exactly we are, what we know and what we don't know, right? Because I was talking about it with folks that I work with at UCD, with students yesterday, and the whole challenge of covering cases like this is the white noise that's on top of this, because there's so much disinformation, so much in terms of lies and diversions that go out there. And it's like, okay, as a journalist or as an analyst, you got to get back to the basic facts. So where are the facts? We're just under 2 weeks away from what was the biggest document dump of the Epstein files, which was about 2.7 million pages that the Trump folks released. And as a reminder, remember, they were supposed to release all the Epstein files in December. That was a deadline they didn't meet, whether it's because they didn't want to meet it or whether it's just the sheer volume of files. But they released about half of the files 2 weeks ago. There's still about 3 million pages that they have not released that are out there. Now, the thing that is striking about that 2 weeks ago is it was the largest release of Epstein files at that point. And for me, it was also the biggest cover-up to date, because what had happened is when they released these files on a Friday afternoon, and of course, when you drop something that you really don't want journalists to get a handle on, you drop it on a Friday, because journalists just want to go home for the weekend, right?
That's a classic trick, isn't it? Yeah.
It's a classic trick. And so everybody's screaming. And of course, there was no catalog. There's no cataloging. There's no index. You could type in search terms, but there was no real guide through this files that you had to. So, you can imagine what it's like if you all of a sudden just a whole shed load of paper showed up in your front room and you're just digging through to try to figure out what the heck it was. But what was striking to me already at that point, while I said they were covering up, is not just the fact that they had not released 3 million pages. That of the 2.7 million that they had released, there were a hell of a lot of redactions. There were entire documents that were blacked out. But then the capper for me was, over the weekend, the Trump folks sent out a guy named Todd Blanche to do the PR on this. Now, it's interesting, by the way, they did not send out Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, because she had screwed up some public appearances, including a previous congressional hearing last autumn. And also, she's the one that had said, a year ago, last February, I've got them here. I've got all the files right here. They're all coming out. So they sent Todd Blanche out, who was Donald Trump's lawyer, personal lawyer, including during the felony cases in 2024. And now he's Deputy Attorney General. So he's not there as an independent representative, providing for an independent Justice Department, to provide security for Americans. He's there as Trump's guy, just as Bondi is effectively a Trump servant. And Blanche comes out and he does a press conference, then he does the Sunday talk shows, and his line, effectively on the line was, whatever documents we withheld, national security, to protect victims, to protect witnesses. We can do that. But the ones that you've got, these establish, he says, there's nothing here that indicates that Donald Trump is involved in any crime. There's no reason to prosecute Trump. Point blank, right? So he's prejudged already. Then he says, this is what got me. There's no reason to prosecute anybody. He just absolved everybody at that point. Now, the reason why that struck, Tim, is that there had been a document in the, because we got a drip feed of files back in December. And there had been a document that had come out then that there were at least 10 potential co-conspirators who Justice Department were trying to contact. In other words, effectively, we're trying to notify them, you may be facing prosecution here, right? Now, this was just after Epstein had died that they're pursuing this. So I know that there was enough in 2019 that people did think that there were possible prosecutions that would be on the cards. Now, the document did not identify who those at least 10 potential co-conspirators were. It gave locations, somewhere in Florida, somewhere in New York, somewhere in other states. I also knew that there were documents which were withheld and were held in December, and then they were withheld in the big document dump that also were vital to establishing, okay, what could we know about Epstein's crimes, the extent of Epstein's crimes? And just to run through them very quickly, the 2007 indictment of Epstein, which is the Florida case, has not been released. The charging paper, which gives the reasons for the indictment in Florida, not released. This was the case where he eventually plea bargained and pleaded guilty to soliciting sex from a 17-year-old. The 2019 New York case, that the documents behind that prosecution, including that could lead to co-conspirators, had not come out. At least I hadn't seen it, right? Now, these are very, very important documents here. Now, let me give you the twist in the tail, because I hope you see where I'm building on this, because I'm focusing on the co-conspirators here. I did an interview with Times Radio with Trump Report last Monday, and I went through this. Oh, sorry, by the way, the big thing, Tim, that has not come out, I'm sorry, before I tell the story, the 302s. The victims, the survivors, I should say, are saying our 302 statements have not been released. Now, FBI 302s are records of field investigations. They are interviews with victims, they're interviews with witnesses, they may be other evidence which they're processing, right? And the victims are saying, our 302s aren't in there, right? So we do not have transparency, implying we told the FBI that there's more here than is being than the Justice Department is acknowledging. So where are our 302s? And that, by the way, will come up when we talk about the Bondi hearing yesterday. That's one of the reasons why you had, I think, at least 11 survivors or relatives of survivors who were in that audience, that we have not seen our testimony come out yet. So the 302s are vital. But let me go back to that 85, 86-page document around the New York case, right? In July of 2019, so Epstein is about to face conviction. He gets convicted, he's facing conviction, and then eventually, of course, winds up dead. That 86-page document was briefly uploaded to the Justice Department website in the document dump less than 2 weeks ago. But then it disappeared a few hours later. I found out about this because I was talking to Times Radio on Monday. And I mentioned it. I said, look, where's the document of the co-conspirators? And one of the commenters said, Midas Touch, an organization that I have a great deal of respect for, Midas Touch got a hold of the document before it was withdrawn, and they've uploaded it. And sure enough, they have. And so I recommend anybody go to Midas, Midas Touch or its parent organization, Midas, and you can see, and I read the document in full. And if you don't mind me explaining why this is important here is that this is a record of interviews with some of the victims, with some of the witnesses, and it includes an interview with a woman named Virginia Giuffre. Now, Virginia Giuffre is the woman who perhaps is best known because she was the first person to come out and talk about Andrew, formerly known as Prince. saying that she was sexually abused by him while she was underage. And of course, there's the photo of Giuffre and Andrew, which many of your viewers may have seen. But Giuffre's testimony to the FBI goes well beyond this. She names other names, right? She names one of the names that that came out yesterday that was unredacted. Came out a couple days ago. It was unredacted, but when those handful of Congress legislators were able to see the documents that had been released, and they were unredacted in some cases. Mm. And one of the 6 names that came out that was unredacted is a guy named Les Wexner. Now, Les Wexner is a big retail giant. I mean, Abercrombie and Fitch, Victoria's Secret are among the businesses that he's got. I think he's got Bed Bath & Beyond as well. And the allegation is Wexner, who was a longtime friend of Epstein's, was involved in the abuse of these women. She also names, I want to be careful here. The name is public, Tim, but I don't want to get you in trouble. She also names a name which did not come out yesterday of a prominent New York hedge fund manager, and I mean a billionaire, who is also a prominent art collector. And I have checked that name. And what's interesting is that it checks out that Virginia Giuffre also had named this person, as well as others, in 2016 when she was considering filing civil action for damages.
Yeah.
So I knew, first of all, when I saw that 86-page document, which talked about people who might have been involved with Epstein, that there were people against whom cases could have been made, right? And not just for involvement in Epstein's financial crimes, but involvement in the pedophilia. I also knew why that document was withdrawn fairly quickly. It should not have gotten onto that site because the information was pretty damning. And I also know this. I do know, however, at that document, I think I know why the FBI did not proceed with prosecuting in 2019. And that is, and I'm going to let your viewers weigh this up as well as others, they didn't believe Virginia Giuffre.
Yeah. I was I mean, she took her own life as well. So that which is
yeah, and they go into detail where, and yeah, we can check out the claims they make where she exaggerated, where she supposedly distorted and do that. But, we can go through and investigate that. But the fundamental here is the FBI did not believe her. Now, again, I'm going to go back to the 302s now, which is important. Did the FBI believe the other survivors?
Mm.
Did they believe the other survivors? And we've got no idea whether or not they did. I'm going to refer to one other document, if you don't mind, Tim, and then I'll build up to what Bondi said yesterday. There's thousands of references to Trump in the big document dump from less than 2 weeks ago, right? But the thing is, if Trump's mentioned in a newspaper article that Jeffrey Epstein had collected, then that counts as a reference. If there is a discussion of Trump's campaign, say in 2015, that counts as a reference. So just saying Trump is mentioned thousands of times doesn't give us an indication of, the significance of that reference. From the documents that have come out, and there may be more to come out, but I think people have gone through quite a few now. There's only one that gets Trump into really potential hot water. And that is that in 2025, for reasons that are not clear, but I think I could speculate on why, the FBI does a summary document, 2-page document of tips that they received in previous years and what they did to follow up on the tips, right? Now, it is important to note that simply having a tip to the FBI doesn't mean that an event occurred because it's unverified. Anybody can call in and make a claim. But amongst those tips that are there are a number which are damning about Trump and others. And we're talking about going beyond, sexual abuse. We're talking about rape in cases of girls, right? At one point, there's an allegation about girls being auctioned off with Trump being involved. Now, I emphasize the tips are unverified. You cannot say this establishes that Trump is guilty of this. There's a quick summary column where the FBI talks about what they did to follow up on these. Now, in a couple of cases, they claim they tried to contact the person that made the tip. They could not reach them. They claimed in a couple of other cases that they did follow up on us, but there was no, there was no substantial conversation. Then they talked about in a couple that there was a more substantial conversation with the person that made the tip, right? We know that at the end of the day, there was no prosecution based on these tips that has come out so far, right? And indeed, the spin last weekend, so this is a week after the documents come out, a few days before Bondi's appearance, the spin that comes out of the White House is, oh, the FBI made the conclusion, no grounds for prosecution, or justice made no grounds for prosecution. And of course, that was the line that Todd Blanche had made as soon as the documents came out a week earlier. Yeah. All right, fine. You're going to tell me that. Here's what I want to know. If the FBI investigated these tips when they were made, and they might have been in 2013, they could have been in 2016, could have been in 2018, they could have been in any number of years. Where's the paper trail of the investigation of the tip? Not just the summary document that was done in 2025. Where's the paper trail about the specific tip? Let's take one, for example, that girls were auctioned at Epstein's estate, and Trump was involved. Unverified, right?
Yes.
Where is your paper trail in terms of FBI? Who you spoke to, when you spoke to them, what was the substance of the conversation? And those documents will exist because you do not question someone and not have a written record of that. That's the whole point if you're an investigator, right? Yeah. That you have it. So, yeah, those 3 million pages that have not been released, now, I will add one other thing, and then we can get into Bondi, because I've talked for quite a long. Legislators, a group of legislators were able to get in at the start of this week and start to view the files that had been released. And I need to emphasize, they only saw files that had been released. What they were doing in looking at those files that were being released is they were looking to see if, look, those names that have been redacted, can we get them unredacted? Right? Which is why we got those 6 names that were publicly identified, including Les Wexner, the retail magnate. They were not allowed to see any of the 3 million files that have not yet been released. That needs to be emphasized. Secondly, 2.7 million documents. And they were given a total of 4 computers for all legislators, right? They can go in, they can take notes. They cannot take in electronic devices. They can take notes, right? But on only 4 computers, right? It's going to take many, many years to go through those 2.7 million documents and go through those redactions if you've only got 4 computers that you can work off of. Thirdly, and this is damning, and this came out at the Bondi hearing yesterday. My wife thinks Bondi deliberately did this. And if Bondi deliberately did this, this is stupid. She had a document in her hand, and we'll talk about what she was doing. She was armed with all kinds of basically notes to try to just simply insult legislators. But one of the documents she had, it was a record of the documents that the legislators had accessed. Effectively a search history, right? So the Justice Department were carrying out surveillance on the legislators in terms of what documents they were looking at. Why? Why would you do that? Right? Now, again, I think we can speculate. I think Justice Department is trying to stay a step ahead of the to find out where the folks are going. You add all of that up, and I said this in December, and I will say this again. This is not transparency. This is not transparency first and foremost for the victims. This is a stonewall. And although they have been forced into releasing some files with redactions, they are still stonewalling because, and I'll just give you the overall mantra here. If there's any American football fans out there, protect your quarterback, the guy that runs the team. And when you have political appointees rather than genuine investigators or independent officials who are overseeing this, and those political appointees were put in place by Donald Trump, their priority is to protect Donald Trump. Point blank.
And I think the thought I had as well, especially after watching yesterday, is that all of the speculation, and frankly, also some of the people that really disgust me are the apologists, who would say that, oh, this is not really a cover-up, it's just mere incompetence. They would try to even attack Bondi herself. I mean, even though they are Republicans, but they were just attacking her that, oh, she's incompetent, she's just not very good at managing this thing, she's never done this before, blah, 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 blah. And I think they were hoping that people would think, oh, because they're so incompetent, they don't know what they're doing, and there are far too many files, they can't manage it. You can't blame them. But I think everything that we've witnessed so far and everything that you've just highlighted, to me, that's not incompetence, that's intelligence. Like, intentional. And there's intelligence behind that approach to, I think they made it intentionally look that, oh, we kind of screwed up, our bad. Whoops. We told you that there be 6 million files, but actually, no, it's 3 million. You don't need the other 3. Our bad. We got this wrong. And there's basically, there's a very thin line that separates incompetence and bullshit. And I think now it's starting to smell more and more and more like bullshit, and it's intentional. So I think if anybody has any doubts that this is a cover-up, literally everything they just highlighted to me, that just screams cover-up to me. There's absolutely no way this is an accident.
Let's walk this back to connect this all the way up to where Bondi appeared yesterday. Go back to a couple of things I mentioned earlier, which is that the White House spin is that last summer, prosecutors had concluded there was no case that could be brought, right?
Yeah.
That will have meant that the Trump administration or officials in the Trump administration were going through those Epstein documents closely at that time. They didn't start going through the Epstein documents in November when Congress asked for them.
Yeah.
Now, why is that important? It's important because remember that the Trump administration's line at the start of 2025, when they thought they could pin this on the Democrats, was, we've got the Epstein files. Look, we're going to bring them all out.
Mm-hmm.
Then by last summer, their public line was, there's no document. There's nothing here. There's no client list. There's nothing of substance here, right? So when Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, the FBI director, appeared before, I think it was Senate committees last autumn, they knew that the files were being processed. They knew that. But Kash Patel, who I think is a combination of incompetence and bullshit, to use your formula, he lied to the Senate committee. He lied and said, because they asked us, how many times has Trump been referenced in the documents? Has he been referenced more than 1,000? No. More than 500? No. More than 200? No. How many? I don't know, right? Well, of course, it turns out that even from, just the innocent references, if you want to call them that, in terms of the files that were released 2 weeks ago, Trump's in there thousands of times, right? So Kash Patel either is completely incompetent or he's a liar, or both. That takes place. Of course, Pam Bondi, when she appeared last autumn, and she kept saying, I never promised to release the files. I never promised them. We've reviewed them all, right? Yeah. Well, and I do think Bondi is competent. I'm on your line here. Bondi knows exactly what she's doing. She's stonewalling, right? She's stonewalling because they're still hoping they never have to release any of the files. They're still hoping. Now their feet get held to the fire. Because Congress, those 4 key Republicans in the House made the difference. And we'll get back to them in a minute because they're still vital. And when those 4 Republicans join the Democrats and you get this vote in the House that says you've got to release, okay, well now they're sort of backed up. What are we going to do about this? Okay. Well, they keep holding off because they're supposed to release every single file they've got. They still haven't released half of them. And now you get Bondi who goes to this hearing, which comes up yesterday. And the reason, what you need to be clear about Bondi is Bondi was not there to answer questions. Okay? Bondi was not there to answer a single question.
It felt like a political campaign. She was just basically regurgitating the usual MAGA talking points. It wasn't even... Not
regurgitating. She had rehearsed everything.
Oh, yeah.
Look at this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all those papers that are in front of Bondi, right? Those are papers, most of which do not have any connection with Epstein. Most of those papers there, if you want to give the kind word for them, it's called opposition research. It's basically hit pieces that you use to go after people, your opponents.
Mm.
And so every time she gets a question from a representative, she's got like a photo of someone who's committed a crime in their district, quite often an undocumented immigrant. And she's got the notes written on the back of the photograph, and she'll hold it up because she knows, and listen, she knows cameras looking at her, so she knows she can get the photograph of the person there. And then she's got the notes that she can read and she effectively is blaming the legislator, in fact, to say, you're the reason why this person committed this crime, right? And it's like, okay, well, I think probably every member of Congress has had an undocumented immigrant who's committed a crime in their district. So I think that's a pretty easy tactic to pull off. So that's why Bondi comes up there. There was that bizarre moment where she overreached in her preparation, which was like, where she said, why are you like criticizing? Why are you, this is a hit job on President Trump. The Dow Jones is more than $50,000. Well, okay.
Yeah, I remember. What the hell has that got to do with anything? Yeah.
I don't think the Dow Jones is $50,000. It's 50,000 points you're talking about, but you go on with that. And then she's going, the NASDAQ is up so much and this is up so much. This is like an unprecedented buzz. And then she say, and at one point, I mean, seriously, legislators were just laughing. They just could not believe how brazen this was, that she had decided, she had rehearsed this line of attack to get away from answering questions about Trump. And this is when she slips up. She goes, why are you laughing? And I'm going, well, we all know why they're laughing. So she kind of slipped up in terms of the rehearsal. And I will tell you the one point where I think that her rehearsed performance, she screwed up big time, because, and we do need to get back to this. We need to get back to the actual evidence we know and don't know for the sake of the victims. But I will tell you that if you're talking about the political optics here, fortunately, the legislators who wanted to cut through this had prepared quite well as well. And these weren't all Democrats. This is also, Thomas Massey, the Republican out of Kentucky, who's vital here. Massey was one of the 4 who voted to get the files released. So they had, they had those survivors that were up there. And Bondi said in her prep statement, oh, the FBI would welcome talking to all these people, yada, yada, yada. And so legislators on more than one occasion had them stand up and said, how many of you all have tried to contact the FBI? And all of the hands go up, right? How many of you have been contacted by the FBI to follow up on this? Not a single hand goes up, right? How many of you, despite the abuse that you've taken, despite the risk and so on, would still like to talk to the FBI? Every hand goes up, right? And these were all women. And there's one male in there, and some people, some Trump defenders have tried to, that's I think it's the twin brother of Virginia Giuffre. Again, the woman who committed suicide recently, who as a girl had been abused, allegedly, by Andrew, formerly known as Prince, and by other men. So there's a photo that's taken, and I wish I had remembered to get the name of the person who took the photograph, because this photographer needs credit for this, because this, I think, will be an iconic photograph. In the background,
Sorry, I think I know which one you're talking about, because it went super viral, and I in preparation for this, let me see if I can share the screen, because I think
because later on in edit, I'm going to encourage you to use this as the cover photograph for, when you do this in edit and post, because this is just like.
So let's see if people can see it.
Yeah, so that's great, Tim. There you go. And there you go. That's Virginia Giuffre's twin brother, who's at the right-hand side of shot in the background. And there are several other survivors you can identify. There's a few who are seated. There were about 11 who were in the room. Now look at Pam Bondi in the foreground.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not just Pam Bondi. And the legislators had asked Pam Bondi to look at the survivors. Look at these survivors, right? That's not just Bondi refusing to look at those survivors. That is her looking down at those rehearsed notes with almost an attitude of disdain.
Yeah.
That she has no responsibility to even acknowledge that the survivors are there. And I think that in a microcosm sums up the Trump camp.
Very much.
That they don't want to acknowledge them. And so we will have those political optics that'll play out over the next few days and so on. But I think what you have already seen is that Tom Massey, the Kentucky representative, came out after the hearing, and I actually should say during the hearing, Massey very effectively went after Bondi on a couple points, and I need to highlight one of them as well, because remember, the survivors. There's been a big to-do that while the names of possible perpetrators, including co-conspirators, have been withheld in these documents, the names of victims, survivors, have come out, right? Including other identifying information, emails, phone numbers.
Which is actually, sorry to interrupt, that was supposed to be illegal, because the law that even Trump himself signed off was said that the only redactions that are allowed are redactions, and not just allowed, they're allowed, and they must make sure that the names of all of the victims are redacted and nothing else is redacted. Yeah. So they've done the exact opposite, basically.
Yeah, they've done the exact opposite. What they flipped it. What they've done is their priority on redaction is to protect possible perpetrators, and the victims are secondary to that. Massey holds up a document. I didn't know about this until yesterday, and the document is an internal memorandum discussing whose names might be redacted. The FBI released the document of names that possibly should be redacted, and it's the names of the survivors. So, in discussing whether or not you should protect the survivors, they've outed them, right? Now, this is either just glaring incompetence or just not giving a damn, or both that takes place. Then Massey refers to, and he has the document that was initially redacted with the identities of several individuals withheld. I think these are the 6 individuals that Massey named. And then he says, let's unredact one of them, because Massey saw the unredacted version, and one of them is Les Wexner, right? And that's a dramatic moment. And Bondi has got, I can't remember Bondi's comeback on it. She tried to insult Massey, some slur against him, the fact that he's not loyal to the press, yada, yada. But Massey came out after the hearing, and what's key here is Massey's not going to let go. I mean, and if anything, Massey's even more infuriated by the way that legislators have been treated this week, because he goes in to see the unredacted documents under these conditions where you struggle to get anything from them because of the way they're making you work. Then he's getting absolutely no respect in the hearing from Bondi, nor any of the Democrats, of course. And I think as long as Massey doesn't let go, and indeed, I'll name a couple of others as well. There were 4 Republicans who joined the Democrats. Massey saw the document, saw some of the documents earlier this week, some redactions removed. Lauren Boebert, with whom I agree on no other issue in the world. She's the woman who was famous for, everybody comes into her cafe and totes guns out in Colorado, and a QAnon sympathizer as well. And now she's a representative, but she wants transparency on Epstein. She came out after seeing the documents and said, look, they are withholding from us, right? Nancy Mace, South Carolina, again, ditto. I don't agree with Mace on anything, but she has effectively reinforced what she said about transparency. And we know Marjorie Taylor Greene's not letting go of this. Yeah. So in no way have they checked, at least in the House, the Republicans who are siding with the Democrats. And remember that they only have a majority of 4 seats now. So they can't keep stonewalling this out of the House. And out of the Senate, it'll be interesting to see, whether some Republicans in the Senate begin to peel away. And I think they will. I think Tom Tillis of North Carolina, who's retiring, I think he's going to come out against Trump over this one. I think, in other words, as horrific as Bondi was yesterday, and I know we haven't gone into a lot of detail about what she did, because in part, I don't like talking about the noise as much as talking about the significance. Yes. As horrific as what she did yesterday was in terms of a political performance, I don't think it helped the Trump administration, the Trump camp. I think they're still in a world of trouble here, because for all the attempts at whether or not they're diversions or whether or not it's just Trump with his attention deficit disorder, or whether because of just their general chaos, whether they attack Iran, whether they go back to Venezuela, whether they go after Cuba, whether they ramp up ICE somewhere other than Minnesota. I don't think they can ramp up in Minnesota now because they've screwed up so badly there. Mm-hmm. I don't think Epstein drops out of the news agenda. That's the thing. And if it stays there, it's going to be corrosive, even if we don't get clarity on Trump and his associates in terms of the files.
Mm. I mean, and that's, I think that's why it's important to keep on talking about this. And and just as a quick aside, I just want to say thanks to all of you guys that are commenting. And there's one comment from Julius Caesar 4176. That said something that kind of triggered the thought in my mind. I mean, the question, or rather the point he made, that I'm surprised they didn't delete everything, so, in terms of all the files, which is surprising. But I have to say, you mentioned the 4 Republicans. And I'm just thinking to myself, basically, if it weren't for those 4 Republicans, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about the files. Yeah. And to me, I'm thinking this is part of, when I talk about the Epstein Class, and of course, the title of this discussion is that the Epstein Class is kind of impacting all of us. It's not just a theatrical political thing that is somewhere up there. I mean, the significance of that, it highlights that these people, they don't care about the law. They don't care about anything. And it just takes a minority, a handful of politicians who have the guts to literally go after them. Because otherwise, none of this would have come out. So, I mean, how did we, and again, I know I ask you this question all the time, but how the hell did we get here? Because where's the law? where are the judges? Where is the police? And of course, the FBI is useless now, like the DOJ. I mean, it's depressing, to be honest with you. And it goes beyond this. I mean, this is just a tiny example. This is just from the political point of view, but it's just that we are in this situation. They just took four people to push hard.
Flagrant self-promotion here. I've just completed a manuscript, and I'm in discussion with a publisher on it. And if there's any other publishers out there, I'm happy to talk to you. If anybody watching right now, come in. I just completed a manuscript to try to address that question, which is all about going back into, America, in quotes, the country politically, culturally, economically, and how did it wind up in a place where Trump got elected in 2016, where he got reelected in 24. And a lot of it, I can walk you through it, but a lot of it has to do with spectacle over reality. And that is that, because of some very serious economic conditions that you already discussed elsewhere, and America has taken a series of punches, as has much of the world in the 21st century. But America, 9/11, that intervention in Iraq in 2003, that deadly intervention there, the deadly intervention in Afghanistan, the fact that those didn't turn out well, most of all for Iraqis and Afghanis, or Afghans, but then also for American power. Then the great financial crash, or great recession, whatever you want to call it. Then the pandemic. You take these series of shots, and people are angry, they're frustrated, and Trump exploits that, make America great again. And he does the classic thing, not just of make America great again for us versus our enemies. And he plays that divisive politics. And, Trump ain't that smart, but he's not intelligent in terms of knowing the issues. In fact, he's downright dumb on a lot of them, but he's a street fighter. Right, he's always been a street fighter as a businessman. He's a street fighter as a politician. He learned from people like Roy Khanna when he was younger. It's the man who advised Joseph McCarthy. And Trump pulls out every sense of the playbook to, the snake oil. I'll make it better for you, our golden age. And meanwhile, we'll get rid of the Democrats, the radicals, the liberals, the judges that we don't like, the juries we don't like. We'll get rid of all of them, right? Okay. And the way that Trump frames it, the American system is a threat to him and to his followers. That's what he calls the deep state, right? And when you frame it as the system is a threat to us, then when I do not observe the rules of the system, I'm defending you, or I'm defending me. And that's been the whole shtick around the fact that here is a man who, reminder on this, he's convicted of 34 felony counts over the Stormy Daniels case, the payoff to the porn star, which was connected to the 2016 election. He is under felony charges in 3 other cases that don't make it to trial, including two of trying to overturn the 2020 election, one at federal level, which is linked to the Capitol attack in January 2021. But also his business has been convicted. Trump Organization has been convicted in the largest fine of its kind in New York state history, $540 million it turned out to be, over fraud. And he's been convicted of defamation in a case linked to his sexual assault, which was, in the words of the judge, tantamount to rape of the writer E. Jean Carroll in the 1990s, right? This is a guy who in any other system that's operating as a legitimate system, it's going to be like he's not in prison. Yeah. But he flips that, Tim. He flips it. And he flips it as, I'm the victim here. I'm the victim of the system. Mm-hmm. The system's out to get me. Lawfare, right? Mm-hmm. And so the whole attempt here, and this is what Bondi did yesterday, the victims are not the one at the back of the room. The survivors are not the victims here. Donald Trump and me and others who work with Trump, we're the victims. Mm. We're the victims of these legislators who are attacking us. And so you flip that narrative. Now, and of course, we're the victims, and our people are the victims of undocumented immigrants. Of course, she's not going to come out documented. She'll call me illegal. She'll give out the names. We're the And the question, if you fundamentally get to it, is how long can that narrative work, right? Because ultimately, if that narrative works, when you take it all the way through, they break the system. Because the system is, if you say the system is trying to attack us and therefore you have to get rid of it, you mean the courts, you mean Congress, you mean state and local governments. Now, does the system hold against that? And in a case like Epstein, to pull it back, which is, no, we need accountability here. We need accountability in which you actually should have federal cooperation with state authorities. Because remember, the cases were in New York and they were in Florida. Mm-hmm. You need cooperation between Congress and the legal system, the Justice Department's at the center of that, to bring this information out. That's the way that the system should operate. But the system can't operate here that way, because for the Trump camp, that means they are no longer the victims. If they let the system operate that way, they may be the possible perpetrators. And it will take us to the question, how long can they do it? That, I've been asked that in terms of the 2026 elections, which I do think will take place. Now, how much they'll be manipulated, that's another question, but I do think they'll take place. But I would say, as long as this administration's in power, you face the greatest crisis to the American system since 1865. Wow. And that, of course, is the Civil War, right? And that's just where we are. And if you look at it that way, for me, Tim, that's where you can connect the dots. You can connect the dots to Epstein, to ICE, to Trump flagrantly, as he did yesterday, completely acting illegally in terms of the way that he approaches the environment when he got the Clean Coal Award, blah, 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 right? Yeah. To the gutting of federal agencies. It just is an authoritarian regime. Yeah. And what's the secret to an authoritarian regime? The authoritarian regime wants to galvanize enough support, because you can't imprison everybody. Mm. You can't kill everybody. You still got to have a level of support as an authoritarian regime. So how do you do it? And this is the paradox. You do it by making yourself the victim. Without saying Donald Trump is Hitler, don't fall into that trap. But remember how Hitler came to power in Germany in the 30s? It wasn't just that he came to power by saying, we're going to make Germany great again. He did say that. But remember that Mein Kampf is a narrative of being a victim. It's all about Germany was a victim of the government, of the system that ran it, which meant they lost World War I, which meant they went into economic turmoil in the 1920s. Mm. And so Hitler and his group of people who had been put in prison, they were the victims as well. Or flip it. Mussolini, who had been imprisoned, I was a victim of the previous system. Flip it. There you go, right? And off you do it. And Stalin, the communists. We were a victim of the oppressive czars.
Yeah.
Right? Who had completely run it. And you just play that for as long as you can get it out there. But they have problems. They have problems, and this is where I do think that I differ from some narratives, which is that there's no way out, that things are just too pervasive. And that is, I do think there's still lines of what you might call a civic culture or responsible culture that are still there, that haven't been shattered. And I think in the Epstein case, it's pedophilia. It is, and there's still some people.
Big deal.
Yeah, there's still some people, and that is, and you mentioned those. There's still a group of Republicans for whom pedophilia is more important than loyalty to Trump. If you want to just get to the chase of it, and that was the case. Let me give you another issue where this came out, Tim, if you don't mind me, if we're just freeing, because this is the one where the Republicans will not cross the line in terms of loyalty to Trump. And it's the way that the news cycle works. I mentioned at the start of the week, I was discussing 3 topics. One was Epstein. The other 2 were Bad Bunny. And, the whole celebration.
For the record,
of American
I thought, I'm not a huge fan of NFL, but I think the music was great, man. I mean, it was definitely a big FU to the MAGA and to Trump. Hence, they completely lost their minds. But yeah, I
they did. They did. I skipped the game because I'm a Patriots fan, and I had it on record, and it got spoiled. So I knew they'd lost. So I didn't watch the game. I went straight to the halftime show. But anyway, that for me was actually a celebration of the culture of the Americas, and we could talk about that later. But the third topic was that, and people may have already forgotten this, Trump had circulated that video with the image of the Obamas as apes.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, God.
And that is just, and I'm going to tell you, look, I am old enough to remember that in the 1980s, there was a famous sportscaster, American football again, I know you're not a fan, but a guy named Howard Cosell, very controversial announcer and so on. He was also a big boxing announcer, a big friend of Muhammad Ali. And his career ended because he used a derogatory name for a running back, right? And I won't repeat what he said, but he actually, I don't think, said it with malice. He just said it because he was stupid. It was one of those cultural ignorant blind spots. Here, Trump retweets this, and Trump either didn't watch till the end of the video where you see the Obamas as apes, or he knows exactly what he's doing. And they gave different explanations of this. And I kept thinking, and the reason why I referred to it, I said, well, how many Republicans are going to cross the line on this and call this out? And there were enough Republicans that crossed the line on it over the video itself that he deleted the tweet, right?
Yeah.
After lying about it, but he deleted the tweet. But would those Republicans now call Trump to account over other issues that involve race? For example, immigration, right? Will they call him to account over, for example, international development, which, the way that he treats Africa and the way, no, of course not. They're not going to hold him to account over that. The line here is that if you hold him to account over the pedophilia and keep demanding the files, he can't close this off because there's only one of 2 ways this ends. Either he releases all the files, and although it'll take time to go through them, some people are going to finally be held accountable, or he continues to try to stonewall this. And you just have this corrosive effect, because I do come back to the other thing that is key here, that in addition to the line that there's some things that American culture is still concerned about that Trump can't break, he lied to his supporters. He said the files would be released. That was a year ago. Well, it was during the campaign. And as late as February 2020, Pam Bondi said the files would be released, and they lied. And even Trump support, don't put down Trump supporters as not, as being unintelligent or as not caring. They do care. They have a different approach, a different perspective. We can explain why they wind up being Trump supporters, and I can walk you through that. And I do think a lot of Trump supporters care about the safety of their kids. Mm-hmm. Now, it just so happened that they thought it would be Democrats who'd be named in the files, right? And as it transpires, and by the way, Tim, I'll say this right now, I work for the Clinton Institute at University College Dublin. We are not connected with the Clinton Foundation, with the Clinton family. We are named the Clinton Institute because the Irish government funds us as a thank you to Bill Clinton for the Good Friday Agreement, right? But I'm happy to discuss Bill Clinton in the files. I'm happy to discuss George Mitchell, who was the man who helped broker the Good Friday Agreement, who is in the files. I'm happy to discuss anybody who's in the files. But the fundamental here is that Trump thought it would just be Democrats who would take the hit. Mm. And they didn't think it through. I think they thought they could parcel out, they could drip feed certain information out of the files.
Selectively.
And that's not the one. Yeah. Selectively, you would bring it out. And that's not the way this works. That's not the way this works even for the Trump supporter, or for some of the Trump supporters.
But they're still apologists. I mean, I mentioned the apologists earlier because I think it's a big problem. Yeah. And actually, it's a point. I don't know if you saw my last episode with Peter Gagan, the great Peter Gagan, the investigative journalist. And, you know, he made the point, which is the reason why I really agree with the term, the Epstein Class, which, of course, was coined by Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna. So the two senators who basically pushed for the release of these files and the law. And so what Peter was saying is that, you know, you look at Tony Blair and Larry Ellison. So Tony Blair was supposed to be the liberal, right? Larry Ellison, hardcore MAGA supporter and funder, right? But they're besties. So the theatrics is that they're all, you know, believe in this, so they believe in this ideology. We believe in whatever, socialism, non-socialism, woke, anti-woke, all that crap, which, by the way, you and I talked about in our first ever episode together, that there's no such thing as right or left anymore, because the people at the top, they don't care about that. It's a game that they're playing. And I just find it frustrating because I personally don't call the voters stupid or anything like that. I mean, I understand. Although I can't forgive them because I think they could have done some research. And I think one of the reasons why I do what I do, and I started, you know, of course, now I launched the Retort Media, because I feel there aren't enough media outlets that actually genuinely try to educate the readers and the public and the public about the reality. They fall for the narratives and the media, mainstream media, this whole balanced stuff, which I'm thinking, you know, I can't remember I can't remember if it was Joe Rogan or one of the big podcasters that made a statement, which I think is it's the dumbest statement I've ever heard, frankly, especially as a scientist, where something along the lines that you've got the truth. No, it wasn't not the truth. I'll try and rephrase it. But there's information and misinformation, and the truth is somewhere in between. I'm like, no. That's bullshit, right? It's like, because that's what the BBC did. So the BBC, for example, with Brexit, they were like, oh, we've got like hundreds of economists that said this is going to be a disaster. But there's one economist who happens to be the same economist that supported Liz Truss's budget. I will know what that caused. Mm-hmm. But in the name of balance, let's ignore all of the other 100 economists and bring one of them versus Patrick Minford, which is the economist that she's supported. And I'm like, no, that's not balance. That's literally bringing a flat earther versus an astronomer. That's not a thing. There's no such a thing as this truth is in between. There's literally truth and bullshit and misinformation. And I think that led millions of people to vote for Brexit, despite the fact, because they generally thought that was a good thing. I believe, of course, with MAGA is the same thing. But let's fast forward to where we are right now. There are still defenders. I even had that on LinkedIn recently, and I even posted about it. That because, of course, part of the Epstein Class, you know, people within my sector, the AI and tech sector, you know, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Bill Gates, etc. They're all named in the files and they were shown in the files.
Sure.
And I had somebody that made a comment to me that they said, I still support Elon Musk no matter what. Something along these lines. And this is the thing that worries me. And frankly, I feel so disgusted. And again, I'm kind of going on a rant because even recently you started to see a lot of Elon Musk lackeys, other apologists coming out on podcasts who say things. And Megyn Kelly, we talked about her before, and she kind of went on a weird tangent again recently. But this whole narrative that, a 15-year-old is not the same as a 5-year-old. I'm like, excuse me? One of Musk's lackeys went to Joe Rogan and was saying something along the lines of, well, in some cultures, young children are married off. So that's, so what's the big deal? Or even worse, that some women, they use their bodies or something along these lines in order to get a deal. I'm like, Jesus Christ. This is a big problem now because we have a lot of these people. They still exist. I don't know if they're the majority. I hope they're not. They're definitely not the majority, but I hope they're a tiny, tiny minority. But they're out there. This is the thing that worries me, Scott.
I understand that, Tim, but let's bring it down to some fundamentals in terms of where we might go next. And we got viewers out there thinking, oh, what can I do, or where should I, join in terms of circulating information? I think there's a starting point here, which is you talked about false balance on issues.
Yes.
You can have false balance on Brexit, for example, or on economic issues. So, for example, I was like, no, it'll be a golden age for Britain versus all the economic reality, which is, no, it's not going to be. And you can still have false balance, which is that for all the signs that the U.S. economy is running into some very choppy waters, you'll bring on Trump's lackeys like Kevin Hassett, the head of the National Economic Council. Great GDP growth and everything's going to be wonderful. And we're turning the corner. You can do that. You can do false balance on immigration quite easily, because I could bring you the statistics about undocumented immigrants. I could talk to you about how the country, U.S. was not flooded with 11 million let in by the Biden administration. That's a blatant misrepresentation. But then you'll get people on the other side who are quite happy to push out the misinformation, right?
Yes.
And indeed, I think they tend to have the upper hand in getting the attention and the oxygen. But when it comes to pedophilia, I don't think you can get that balance. See, despite what you just cited here, and I can remember that, there was a movement which was parodied by South Park a couple of decades ago, which was the Man-Boy Love Association, NAMBLA, or something like that. It was like some weird organization, right? Yeah. And it's like, no, you can't. You can't do that. And I think what that means is, on this case, is that, and what you have to be aware of is that the Trump folks can't set up the false balance here. They can deflect. What they do is that they deflect instead. So the two common deflections that I'm seeing right now is, one is, look at the others who are named in the files, which is a legitimate thing to bring up, right? But, if we're going to talk about Bill Clinton, we're going to talk about Bill Gates, we're going to talk about Larry Summers and so on. That deflection only works to a certain extent, because if we're going to name about the Democrats and you're going to deflect them, we're still going to come back to you and say, yeah, but what about everyone?
Problem.
Yeah, right.
I think
so what they do is,
to be fair about mentioning the other people, it's not about the fact that whether they're complicit or not, but it's the fact that they don't care. It's like they know what Epstein was, because they've all, hung out. They did hang out with him post his conviction, and they just don't seem to care. I mean, just to take that a little bit deeper, Tim, and I would think that for me, a key here is the timeline, which is that once Epstein is convicted in the Florida case in 2008, and even though it's a plea bargain and he gets a relatively light sentence for what he should have gotten, you can't be ignorant at that point of who Epstein is. Yes.
Right? And that's why, again, Bill Clinton, I think, and this doesn't give him a complete pass, but Clinton can say, I didn't associate with Epstein after 2008, and there is no evidence that he associated with him. And again, to be fair, there's no record that Donald Trump associated with Epstein after 2008. We're talking about how complicit was he before 2008. There were other individuals who continued to associate with Epstein after 2008. And the reason why, in this case will mean very little, I think, to most people in the States, because it was big in Ireland, is that George Mitchell, who was an icon over here, because, he brokered the Good Friday Agreement. As soon as the document dump came out a couple of weeks ago, Queen's University Belfast removed the sculpture that was a tribute to Mitchell. They just moved it, like, bang, gone.
Yeah.
And it was like, and the reason why is that Mitchell had been accused of some pretty serious stuff in the files. I won't go into that. But he had also maintained contact with Epstein after 2008, 2009. Peter Mandelson, the former UK ambassador to the United States, former British minister, good pal of Tony Blair's, he comes a cropper because not only does he continue to associate with Epstein after 2009, he's leaking information to Epstein about the British government, including getting
the
rid
financial
of
press,
the prime minister, and leaking financial information. So Mandelson's caught dead to rights on that. And Howard Lutnick, Trump's Commerce Secretary, why he's in hot water, one of the few Trump people to really be in hot water at this point is that he had said, I didn't meet Epstein after 2005. Even though he was a next door neighbor of Epstein's. But then, of course, he gets busted because he went to Epstein's Island. He went to Epstein's Island with the wife and the kids in 2012, 2013. And earlier,
by the way, he used as an excuse. Like, I didn't go there on my own. I took my wife and my kids, which is like,
that looks even better, right? Yeah, dude.
It's like, what?
At least you took your kids with you when you left, you plank. So that I think is a virus. But anyway, I think that deflection overall, and I think the response to it, if you hear that from people who are defending Trump, is just to simply, it's just the line say, look, everyone is held accountable. Everyone's held accountable. No right, left here, no Democrat, Republican. Now, the other deflection they're going to use, and Bondi used it again yesterday, is, why didn't the Biden folks release the files? And that gives them a little bit of cover, because the actual explanation is very important, but it's kind of like not headline grabbing. And that is, while you have a live legal case, you cannot release files that may be related to that case. And Ghislaine Maxwell, one of the only two people to be convicted, the other is Jeffrey Epstein. She was Jeffrey Epstein's right-hand person on this. Her appeals were not completed until the autumn of 2024. So you can't release files that might be pertinent to the case that had come out in that and so on. And it just so happened that, of course, that's at the point when the Biden administration is leaving office. So the first opportunity you have to really release the files is when the Trump people come in. But remember this, they had promised to release the files. So, so those deflections will continue. It's just that I don't think those deflections they're not going to hold up. I just don't think they're going to hold up. And I think this is really weird, Tim, to where we're getting. And it's not like, it's maybe speaking as a person, I think, it may be a faith in human nature that has shattered, but I just will reiterate this. I think what makes Epstein so different politically from anything else that Trump is facing, the economy, I think, will be the decisive factor with Trump, but we'll park that for a minute. In terms of a headline issue, a gut issue, is that a snake oil salesman can tell you black is white. He can tell you up is down. He can tell you that your best friend is actually your enemy. He can tell you that another human being is actually the devil incarnate. But can a snake oil salesman tell you that a matter affecting children, the most violent things you can think about at children, can he tell you not to feel those? Can he tell you that, right? And at the point, if Trump ever got away with that, then it's beyond the system's doomed. The American culture is doomed if he ever gets to that. And I think what you've seen in the last few months is he cannot get away with that. And I also think, I will add to this, and maybe we'll park this then for our next discussion, because we cut people quite a long time. He's slipping. That's the other thing that we haven't discussed, and we can discuss next time. He's slipping. Now, I will emphasize in saying this, I'm not a trained doctor. I am the son of 2 psychologists, so I've got some experience through them in terms of mental health issues and so on. But he is physically and he is mentally slipping.
Yeah.
And so his attempts at deflection, his attempts at diversion are not working as well as they did before. And I think the combination of that, of Epstein, and then the more boring but quite serious issue of the economy, means that we enter into another phase here. But I am going to give you the caveat, and I've said this to others as well, that a wounded animal is most dangerous when it is wounded.
Yes.
The Trump camp will be at their most dangerous when they are wounded and when they are fighting for what they see as their survival, because they will resort to anything to try to tear down the system against them. Under the cloak of being victims, they will try to lash out. And that's going to be what we have to be prepared for by cutting through the misinformation and the disinformation, by providing information, but just having each other's backs in terms of these issues as they come up over the next few months.
And I think as a closing, sort of as a conclusion, because I know it's been an hour, so time always flies when I talk to you, Scott. It's like because it's a great insight, but I think it's the fact that the administration and people around him, again going back to the Epstein Class, they don't care about society, they don't care about anything. And I don't know if you saw that email, but I'm going to use that email as a conclusion, just as a reminder to people, and I will share it very quickly. Because is it loaded yet?
Yeah, I got it.
Because you've seen this one, right? So it's the email between Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Thiel, and of course, those who don't know, Peter Thiel is obviously a major one of the so-called PayPal mafias, and in this email, basically, Jeffrey Epstein sent it to him. And by the way, because some people say, "Oh, could be email, AI, blah blah blah." This document that you see in front of you right now, this is directly on the DOJ website. I'll put the link in the description as always. So I am literally on the DOJ website. So this is from the horse's mouth, as it were. So Jeffrey says to Peter Thiel, Brexit, just the beginning. Peter Thiel responds, of what? And he responds, return to tribalism, counter to globalization, amazing new alliances, interesting, right, neo-fascists perhaps, neo-Nazis. You and I both agreed 0 interest rates were too high. And as I said in your office, finding things on their way to collapse was much easier than finding the next bargain. Yeah. So for those who did not believe in disaster capitalism or whatever, there is your evidence here. This is how these people think. They want to destroy everything to benefit whatever it is that they're doing, basically, right? It's all to benefit themselves. They supported Trump, not because they believe in the ideology or whatever, because he is, I guess, their puppet or their gateway to whatever it is that they're trying to do. So I think we this is probably a nice way to finish it. So just as a reminder that these people, ladies and gentlemen, do not care about any of us. So when they say to you, the fat ridges of this world say to you, we're here because we care about the working man, the working class, bullshit they do. This is it.
And let me give you a teaser then for the next time we talk, Tim, and hope everybody will come back in. And that is, riffing off of that, let's tell a story which connects Jeffrey Epstein, Peter Thiel, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's former chief strategist, Elon Musk, the right-wing hard right party AfD in Germany, the Reform Party in the UK, the National Rally in France, and maybe a few other people as well. So if you want to come back to that story, let's set up a podcast to do it.
Probably the next live, right? Like, because what I want to do is I used to have at least like one live session a month. So for every 4th Thursday of the month, have a live event like this. So probably the next one, sort of towards the end of February or something. So that would be
it's a date.
A teaser. And somebody said that they're already looking forward to your new book. So am I.
If you know a publisher, send them my way, okay?
Yeah. And also, as a plan, somebody said that they want to know where I'm going to go with this. One of the sections that we have on the retortmedia.com is AI Watch, for obvious reasons because of my background. But actually, we are going to put together a section called Epstein Class Watch for that very reason. So we're talking about the points that Scott talked about, but also the things like that we have here in the email. And also the other thing that I feel not many people talk about is the bio watch, because these same people now are investing crazy amount of money on biohacking, biotech, some dodgy biotech, and what they describe as life science. Now, again, because I'm a biomedical scientist, I want to dig into that. Not enough people talk about it. So we'll come back to that. So, but Scott, as always, man, thank you so much. And everybody who joined in and commented, thank you so much, guys, for all of the support. Please make sure you check out all of our links as usual in the description, etc. Scott, my friend, I'll see you soon, and best of luck. We're gonna have a lot of sessions on this for sure.
You great people, be decent to each other. We'll see you soon.
Here, here. Thank you, guys. Well, my friends, this is it. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thanks so much for joining us. Now, before I go away, if you are on YouTube, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button below. It really makes a massive difference for the growth of our channel. And if you're following us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you need to give us a star review. Apparently, your following means nothing unless you give us a star review. Don't ask me why, but give us whatever star review that you think is fair. And if you're not following us, what are you doing? Come on, man. It doesn't cost you anything. It really makes a big difference. I really, really appreciate your support. But also, if you've got cash to spare, consider to become a founding member. We are an independent medium. We're not reliant on any kind of company that gets money from Russian oligarchs or any kind of weird sponsorships or anything like that. All of the companies that work with us are genuine companies that I know and I like. But ultimately, it's the members, you guys, our subscribers, our followers, our founding members, or those of you who actually just donated us like $1 here, a couple of bucks there, $5 there. All of that makes a big difference. This is what makes us truly independent. We're not chasing clickbait because we don't want clickbait. We want facts. We want the truth. We want something that we can all aspire to and something that truly make us at least work harder to make the world a better place. Not just talk about it, but actually make it happen. And of course, it supports all of our campaigns as well. So my friends, thank you so much. Much love. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.